This is Solve It for Kids.
Hello, my amazing and curious friends. My name is Jennifer, the Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, and this is Solve It for Kids, the science podcast that gives kids and families a peek inside the real world of scientists, engineers, and experts as they solve problems in their jobs using creativity, cooperation, and critical thinking. And now please welcome to the show my podcast partner, Galactic Space Geek, Jeff Gagne.
Hello, Jennifer, and hello, listeners. We have got a very interesting episode today because we are going to be talking to somebody who has a job that kind of affects all of us in all of our different areas, but most of us never thought about it.
This is so true. So what problem are we solving today?
What can you learn from an incident meteorologist?
What is an incident meteorologist? Ooh, this is going to be intriguing because I'm not even sure I even know what that is. So who is our guest today, Jeff?
Let's get to it so we can find out. Today, our guest is Jon Fox. He is an incident meteorologist for NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Welcome to the show, Jon.
Well, thanks for having me, you guys. I'm excited to be here and talk about some of what I do for a living.
Well, this is going to be really cool because, not many people know what an incident meteorologist is or does. But before we get to that, I always like to ask, so when you were a kid, did you always look at the weather and track the weather and all that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. I love talking about this question. So first of all, I remember when I was 5 or 6 years old, I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
And part of my favorite, the awesome weather there. And part of my favorite thing there was the severe thunderstorms that we get. I had something called a NOAA weather radio, which is just a weather radio that you can put in your house.
Right.
And if there's like a big thunderstorm coming by or a tornado or something like that, it'll actually sound an alarm on the radio itself. And I'd get so excited about that. And I'd run outside to go see what the weather was doing to see if that thunderstorm was going to bring some big winds and, knock some tree branches down or a tornado would be nearby. I was just so excited about that.
You
when
were
I was
5 or 6?
I was 5 or 6. I love that stuff in kindergarten. And I would just listen to the NOAA weather radio all the time. And it's not the most exciting radio station or anything like that, but it was entertaining to me for whatever reason. I just loved the weather and I loved watching the weather reports on the TV news. And I thought, I would love to do something like this for a living just because I loved weather so much. So that's really what sparked my interest. Ever since I was a kid, I knew I wanted to do this. And I went to college to become a meteorologist and I'm still working as one today. So, I was lucky that my dreams panned out.
Yeah, that's so fun.
That is terrific. And we actually hear the vast majority of our guests answer the opposite. They did not know when they were kids that they would be doing what you're doing now. So I want to ask, and you just mentioned you went to college for it as well. So all these years later, are you still just as excited about the weather and meteorology?
Well, so let me tell you the truth here. I'm retiring within a year. I still love what I do, but part of the bad stuff that we do as meteorologists, at least for the National Weather Services, we have to work 24/7. So we work a lot of night shifts and things like that.
Wow.
I still love the weather just as much as when I started. It's just as I'm getting up there in age, it's harder and harder to stay up all night and it's harder to recover from the lack of sleep. But I still
understand.
Yeah. I'm still very passionate about weather, though. So
completely
I love
understand. Okay. Yeah. So now here's the big question. What is an incident meteorologist? What do you do?
All right. Well, that's a great question. So honestly, when I was a kid, I never heard of an incident meteorologist. And I don't think most people have either. So honestly, I didn't even know what it was. But I remember about 12 or 13 years ago, one of my good friends in the Weather Service said, hey, here's a program that you might be really interested in where you can work hand in hand with some of our partner agencies. And what you're going to do is you're going to be sent to the middle of nowhere in a lot of cases, and you're going to forecast the weather at a fire, or you're going to forecast the weather at a hazardous site where there's, a chemical leak or something like that. So I'm a kind of a specialist meteorologist. I had to get training to do this. And they send me to places where there's a demand for real precise weather information and weather forecasting.
Yeah. Oh, like fires.
Okay.
I would think that's kind of important there.
Yes,
Yes.
fires are very important.
All right. So I want you to dig a little bit deeper. You just said you ended that answer with very precise weather information. So how much more precise are we talking? Like what kind of additional information does an incident meteorologist bring that people that are in an incident can't just turn on their local weather for?
That's a great question, Jeff. So a lot of the fires that I go to are actually in the Western United States where there's a lot of mountains, there's a lot of river valleys, there's a lot of, fields and whatnot. And the more complex the land is around you, the more mountains or the more river valleys or things like that, it can have a dramatic impact on what sort of weather you're going to expect. For instance, if you're high up on a mountain at, say, 7,000 feet in elevation, the temperature is likely going to be much cooler than it would be down at, say, 3,000 feet where the weather's actually occurring. Also, the mountains can have huge impacts on the way the wind direction blows or on the wind speeds. And as far as weather impacting fires, that's probably the number one element that impacts fires more than anything is the presence of strong winds. So it's very important that they can get that information from an incident meteorologist because a general forecast for just a large area won't contain that sort of precision.
Well, that's extremely important for fires, I'm assuming, because you also need to talk about the shifting winds and which way they're going and all that kind of stuff. So is that one of the reasons why it's important for you to be at the event when it's happening?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I get sent to an incident, for instance, we put up weather stations, which will give us, up-to-date information about what the wind directions are doing. Hopefully we have radar coverage. So if there's thunderstorms nearby, we can see where the thunderstorms are coming from and try to estimate when, say, outflow winds or wind gusts from the thunderstorms will hit the fire and impact, the potential direction in which the fire is moving.
Wow.
So it really helps with the safety of the people who are actually doing the hard work on the fire, those who are fighting the fire, digging the lines, chopping down trees, things like that. So there's a huge safety aspect of it. And when we're embedded with these people, we see what's going on the ground. We still have tools where we can see what's going on with the weather. And we have to communicate that to these troops or the people fighting the fires as quickly as possible. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So this is actually very pertinent to me right now. I actually work at the Air Force Academy. The last couple of days, we have had a brush fire on the Air Force Academy and very windy conditions here. And I happen to live in a part of Colorado Springs where I had to evacuate when the Waldo Canyon fire came through here back in 2012.
Wow.
So when you go out as an incident meteorologist, are you essentially going out as early as possible to meet up with the fire crews? Basically, as soon as they're going out, you're going with them?
So theoretically, if things were to work in a perfect world, that would be the case. But a lot of times when a fire breaks out, it's just hectic. And they're just trying to figure out what's going to go on, what their tactics are going to be, how they're going to fight this, how many fire trucks do they need? Do they need air resources? Do they need airplanes? Do they need bulldozers? Things like that.
Right.
So initially, when the fire first starts, we might not be called out right away. But once that team gets its feet on the ground and figures out what it's going to do next, typically we get contacted relatively quick. We're just not usually there once the fire breaks out. And for that Waldo Fire Canyon, Jeff, I do believe the Weather Service did send out an incident meteorologist to help with that incident. So kind of a neat deal.
That incident meteorologist would have seen my house. I could have hit the fire with a golf ball from my front yard.
Oh, geez. That's not fun.
Yikes. Yeah, fires are not fun.
They did a great job. My house is still there.
Good.
That's good to know that. Thank you for the firemen and everybody fighting the fire. So you mentioned communication. So that's what I'm curious about. How do you get all of the communication to the people on the front lines and all of the different things? Because I'm imagining there's like a lot of different groups that, have to talk to, especially if some are fighting the fire on one side versus the other side. And how does that work?
Oh, that's a great question. So First of all, if you're going to be an incident meteorologist, you have to like to talk to people because we are doing briefings throughout the day. And the question of how do we get our information out to the crews? So typically we start our day. It could be 0600, it could be 5:30 in the morning. Generally, we meet right before the sun comes up or shortly thereafter. And what we do is we give the weather briefing to the people who are going to be going out to the fire for the rest of the day to fight the fire, so they know kind of what sort of weather to expect, if there's going to be a wind shift, things like that. Those are the sorts of things they need to know. But that's just for parts of the fire, because you mentioned there could be people on a remote portion of the fire, and there are. In situations like that, what we'll do is we will do briefings over the radio. So typically fires have radios that can hit all parts of the fire. So we do that for the remote people, but for the people who are close in to where our camps are, we would present that to the group, and we could brief up to, several hundred people at a time. So these can be really big briefings. And then when these people get briefed, they go out and they talk to the rest of their crews and they spread the word to them. So that's for the day shift people, but then there could be night shifts as well. And then we just rinse and repeat and do the same sort of thing.
So do you sleep there or?
Well,
not much, huh?
Not much. So we have really long days. So yeah, ideally we sleep there, but there might not be a lot of time for sleep. So.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So adding up a few of your answers together, it sounds really, really particular on like where you are in the country and like what is happening. Do incident meteorologists have regions? Like you specialize in mountains, so you always get sent to mountainous regions and maybe you don't go to the Kansas plains?
So typically speaking, when the Weather Service sends out an incident meteorologist, they like to send them to the fires that are close by to their area, because I forecast weather for Eastern Washington and North Idaho. So theoretically, I'm more familiar with that area than, say, someone who lives in North Carolina. But we are trained to actually do forecasting anywhere across the country. And in fact, my first fire was actually in the Okefenokee Swamp on the Georgia-Florida border. And hey, I didn't even know swamps could burn, so I learned that. So I was sent there. And I've also been sent to Australia as a meteorologist as well, which is really cool.
Yeah, so the Okefenokee is closer to me. So I'm over in Northeast Florida. So I have to ask, do you have incident meteorologists for hurricanes? Because that's what affects me.
So no, we do not have incident meteorologists for hurricanes. There's actually a subset of the National Weather Service called the Tropical Prediction Center. They're the ones who give the hurricane tracks that you'll see on TV or things like that. They're the ones who come up with those forecasts. And then that information is relayed through the various Weather Service offices that would be located across Florida or wherever the hurricane is expected to move into. So I do not do that. That's outside of my expertise. It sounds fun, but that's not my specialty.
I've lived here long enough. I can't even tell you how many hurricanes that we have gone through. And we're used to, the Weather Channel having people here. Usually if honestly Jim Cantori shows up in your backyard, then you know that you're at the epicenter of the hurricane.
Yeah.
That's kind of what happens, but they're up and down. But so, yeah, it makes you wonder, because that's what I was wondering, since that's what you do, if they send people like you guys out here or not.
No, not for hurricanes. Theoretically, they could. Like if there's a big recovery that has to be done after, where they're going in and looking through properties or damage surveys or things like that, they can send us in to help with that, because that doesn't involve the hurricane forecasting itself. It has to do with the recovery efforts that take place after, in which case they may need some precise weather information. I have not experienced that in my career. Others theoretically have, but not me. If you recall, there was the big oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico.
Oh, yes.
However long ago, there were incident meteorologists that were sent out to that. So that's kind of the closest thing I can think of in your area.
Okay.
Why? What did they do there? Support. They watched where the oil was going?
So they were just brought in to actually provide forecasts for the various agencies that were brought in to do the cleanup, the recovery, things like that. They needed precise weather. It's not as high-paced, for instance, as being at a wildfire, but that's another thing that incident meteorologists are allowed to do, is go in and help with those sorts of efforts if agencies need help with precise weather. Because the local weather service offices, they have so many other things to do that they might not be able to dedicate someone just to the needs of that incident.
Right.
And that's why we would be brought in because, weather service offices have a lot of things on their plate at any given time, and they can't necessarily support just one incident with all the demands for briefings or updated weather. It's hard sometimes to provide that. So that's why we would be brought in to help in those situations.
I see. Makes sense.
Okay. Earlier, you mentioned you are nearing the end of your career. I imagine you have a whole lot of stories having done this for a long time. Can you give us an idea of maybe one of the biggest incidents you were a part of, or a story that sort of sticks out in your mind of this was either a famous event or comms went out and we had to do this?
So one of my most memorable incidents I ever went to was on the Oregon coast. And my family and I, we vacation to the Oregon coast every year. And if you've ever been there, it's a beautiful area. It's full of lush pine trees, moss.
Wow.
It's wet and it's green. It's primordial looking, like dinosaurs should live there or
good word.
something. But it turned out that in the year where I got sent there was this big Labor Day windstorm that brought 90 plus degree temperatures there. It brought 50, 60 mile per hour winds.
Whoa.
It downed a bunch of trees and it burnt houses. And I just couldn't imagine that anywhere that's usually that moist could actually burn.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing to see what nature can do in these weird weather events, because it's extremely rare where it's warm and dry and windy on the Oregon coast. Usually it's wet and moist and there's drizzle all the time. So I got sent there and I just thought it was kind of neat to see, what weather can do. It was bad, unfortunately, that houses burnt down and things like that, but just to see the power that weather can produce and how things can change so much from normal to bring big fires to the Oregon coast, to me was just pretty amazing. So that was just one of the things I couldn't believe. Other things I've done, I've been to fires in a town called Stanley, Idaho. And one of the most memorable things was, it was beautiful. You're surrounded by the Sawtooth Mountains, which is this real steep mountain range surrounding this valley. During the day, it'd be beautiful, like high temperatures in the 70s and 80s. But as soon as the sun set, the temperature would just plummet below freezing. Like there'd be puddles in camp where we were. And after you were done with dinner in the sunset, you'd walk through and there'd be ice everywhere. To me, it was just amazing how quickly it could cool off. And it wasn't a fun experience by any means, but it was certainly memorable because I never realized how quickly it could get that cold. So we would see low temperatures in the teens in September, which is horrible for sleeping. And we sleep outside in tents, so certainly not a pleasure by any means, but it was extremely memorable. And I can't beat the Okefenokee Swamp. I mean, just to see alligators and the fact that the swamp is burning, it was just a surreal experience. Plus, it was my first incident I ever got to go to. So those would be the highlights.
Good stories.
There's plenty of gators over here on this side of the world.
Yes.
You can keep them.
Yeah, well. So let's go back to the fire, where you're doing the fire, because I know, we've had fires around here. Jeff's had fires near them. As you know, conditions change. Have you ever had that where you're watching it and all of a sudden the wind shifts unexpectedly and you're like, oh gosh, what do you guys do in that situation?
Yeah. So in those situations, usually when you see an abrupt change in the weather, it has to do with the winds coming from a thunderstorm. And again, that's one of the most dangerous things that we see. So for instance, let's say the winds are coming out of the south all day at 5 to 10 miles per hour. But there's a thunderstorm that forms north of the fire. And what thunderstorms will tend to do is they'll produce gusty winds, or outflow boundaries is what we call it. So when it rains really hard, it's like pointing a fire hose down at the ground. And when you do that, there's winds that kind of radiate away from the center of that rain core. So that can cause an abrupt wind shift on a fire, because that thunderstorm to your north will all of a sudden move into the fire and produce north winds, which are far different than the south winds that they'd countered all day. So it's things like that make our job so important. And we need to communicate that to the troops on the ground, because we want them to get to safety. Because, if the fire changes direction on you, that can cause some pretty bad things.
Oh, so very quickly it can cause big problems.
Very quickly. Yes, exactly. So that's probably the most extreme sort of weather changes we can see. Another weather change you see generally on a daily basis has to do with what we call a temperature inversion. So you notice like in the morning when you wake up that the temperatures will be cool and things like that. Well, when we see that infers that the atmosphere is kind of stable. It's hard to get strong winds. It's hard to get a lot of mixing on the fire, so to speak. But what happens is that when we break that inversion during the course of the day through daytime heating, what'll happen is it'll allow the ventilation on the fire to increase substantially, and that'll cause the fire to grow. So the winds will pick up, the fire column, if there is any fires, will grow substantially. So it's kind of like when you have a damper on a fire, all the smoke is kind of suppressed toward the ground. But when you take that damper off, it allows the smoke to rise and the fire will get hotter quicker and that sort of thing. So that happens almost daily on a daily basis when you're on a fire. So the fire, which will look really subdued early in the morning, will tend to pick up during the afternoon hours just because of that heating and drying and the winds pick up. So yeah, it's pretty critical to communicate that with the fire troops as well.
Whoa.
It sounds like there's so much data and information that goes into all of this. You talked earlier, you mentioned that you studied meteorology, which makes a whole lot of sense as an incident meteorologist. Is part of your training also about fire and how fires are created? And like you were just talking in very detailed terms about what happens and how it happens with fire. Like, do you guys, as an incident meteorologist, do you go through maybe a short fireman's course?
So not really a fireman's course. We have to do special training that has to deal with fire weather itself. So we also teach the fire weather to fire crews as well, because it's important for them to know about that inversion thing that I talked about. They need to know how fire will react when the lid comes off the atmosphere, for instance, in the afternoon, and you can expect fire growth and things like that. So we have to take training, pretty in-depth training, meteorology training, about how the weather reacts to the mountains, how winds react, that sort of thing. But we also teach it to the firefighters as well, because it's important for them to have a grasp on what to expect as far as a typical day goes based on fire activity and how it relates to weather, if that answers your question.
It does.
Yeah. So this is really cool. And you have loved weather your whole life. But what would you say to a kid who's interested in kind of doing what you do? Where should they start?
So if you want to become a meteorologist, which is a pretty fun career, I'll tell you, you can start at least trying to figure out when you're in high school, where you might want to go to college to learn meteorology, because there's only so many schools in the country that teach it. But some of the basis for meteorology classes is you have to have a heavy interest, or not necessarily interest. You have to know math. There's a bunch of math classes that go into it. There's a bunch of physics classes that go into it. And those were not my favorite. I did not like physics. I did not like math. I just wanted to do the fun meteorology stuff. I just wanted to forecast weather. But they expect you to learn these equations and things like that. They want you to understand what goes into the science of meteorology.
Exactly.
So yeah, if you're interested in weather, if you're like me and you're a young child, or, you could be 5th, 6th grade, whatever, if that's something that interests you, research what colleges you might want to go to. I understand that college is still a few years away if you're that age.
Right.
But nonetheless,
it's never too early.
It's never too early. I had my sights set back when I was young, and I always knew I wanted to do this. So if there's someone out there like me, and hopefully there is, just do a little research ahead of time and, and keep to your dreams. If that's something you want to do, then by all means, I'd say pursue it, because I think it's a rewarding career. And, going to fires as an incident meteorology is only the cherry on top.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. I like that. Good explanation. So we have been talking about your career, which has been your past. I want to ask one question before Jen moves us on about your future. You mentioned you were going to be retiring. Will you be keeping weather as a hobby? And how will you be doing that?
My wife will still be in the weather service, so I guess I have to keep it as a hobby to make her happy. Actually, when I retire from the weather service, I can pursue still doing some sort of weather on fires. And there's a job called an air resource advisor. And what they do is they actually forecast what's going to happen with the smoke and the smoke impacts as it relates to people's health and that sort of thing. So that's an opportunity that can open up for me when I retire from the weather service. You don't have to be working for the weather service to do that. So that's something I may want to pursue after I retire, because I love doing things with fires. I love going to fires. I just love being outdoors and seeing the beauty that the country has to offer, and always going to someplace new and learning something new about the weather So that's probably going to be my pursuit if I'm going to stay, active in a science community.
That sounds great.
Fire. So
yeah, that sounds fun. I mean, the thing I think I've learned from listening is how incredible weather patterns are in our world, and how, kind of like the storms, the winds, all that kind of rules all, right? Like we live amongst this.
Right.
But it kind of does what it wants for the most part, yes?
It definitely does what it wants. Even though we can forecast the weather, we have no control over the weather. So we're just the messengers, and we try to get the message out to people ahead of time, especially if there's dangerous weather coming. Whether I'm doing my job for the weather service in the office, issuing winter storm warnings, or whether I'm at a fire, giving the crews, heads up on when a wind shift might occur. We don't control it. We just send out the messages is all we do. So,
well, those of us that receive the messages are very thankful that you do.
Appreciate.
We like all the watches and the warnings that come our way. Okay, so we are at that point in our show where we ask our guests to give our listeners a challenge. What challenge do you have for our listeners, Jon?
All right. Well, I have a challenge that I would have loved to have done as a kid. And in fact, I probably did do it as a kid. So my challenge to you folks out there is I want you to get the latest 7-day weather forecast, whether you get it from the weather service, which is where I hope you get it from, or whether you get it from the TV news. So write down that forecast and then take notes for the next 7 days, observing, did the forecast match the 7-day forecast?
Ooh.
And if it matched, how many days matched, how many were different, and how different were they? And my guess is the first 1 or 2 days of the forecast is probably going to be more accurate than the 6th and 7th day. Doesn't always work out that way, but typically it does.
Yeah.
Because we have more expertise in weather, the closer a weather event is, because, a lot of things can change the weather pattern as you get up farther in the forecast period. So that's what I want you guys to do.
I love that challenge. I think that's great. And I think, people can understand because, here they'll say, oh, storm on Wednesday. And then you're like, no, storm Thursday. As you get closer, then you finally know when it is. Oh, it's Wednesday night, not Thursday morning, all these different things. So I might actually try that too and just see how accurate it is. That's pretty fun. That's a good challenge. Yeah,
I'll do it as well. I'll do it for fun as well. I'm going to join everyone.
Excellent. All right. We got 3 different states covered.
I think your forecast might be a little better than ours, but you never know. I mean,
you never know. Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for being on Solve for Kids, Jon.
Thank you, Jon.
Thank you, guys. Thank you guys for having me. It's been a pleasure.
The behind the scenes look, and I feel like Jon put us right with the crew and the team, and I feel like every listener is going to have their own version of what that means. Like, I don't get hurricanes here in Colorado, but we get wildfires, and I can totally imagine the incident meteorologist working with the firefighters and all of the first responders. And Jen, I'm sure you could picture the same thing down in Florida.
Absolutely. So we get hurricanes and wildfires. So we have it all down here. Hopefully not at once, of course. But, this was so intriguing, I think, for me, because I learned a lot about what an incident meteorologist does. Like, I'd never heard that term. And it just kind of makes you go, well, duh, someone has to be helping, kind of like be the person that feeds the information about the weather to the firefighters and all this kind of stuff. So this was really cool. And I loved his challenge too, didn't you, Jeff?
Oh, definitely. This is one I feel like it's super simple. And I feel like a whole bunch of us maybe have thought of this before, but now it's time for us, because Jon tasked us as a challenge. We have to do it. We need to look up our local 7-day forecast. We need to write it down, or maybe even just take a picture of the TV when the news is coming on, or screenshot your device that's got it. And then we need to compare for those next 7 days whether or not the weather in your local area actually matches. And I love the idea of also keep checking the forecast and notice how many times it changes from the professionals in those 7 days. This is going to be interesting now that we do it.
Yeah, I really think so. And you can also kind of help predict, especially if there is an event actually going on, so you can keep track of it. So if you do that, let us know what you learn. We would love to hear from you. You can tag us on our social media. We are at KidsSolve at Facebook, X, and Instagram. And don't forget to check out our website, solveitforkids.com, where we have information about this episode and all of our other episodes, as well as book lists for recommendations if kids want to learn more. So leave us a message. We'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely, and it'll be interesting to see the different locations and weather that everybody gets. Until next time, you'll hear Jen and Jeff on
Solve It for Kids.